newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm so glad you could join us. And boy, as the election gets closer, things are just getting so intense. We're going to be talking about protecting us from the deniers because the memo has gone out. And election deniers, well, let's just say that they are making the political class very worried at this point because there's a distinct possibility that some people may not know to shut up and do as they're told, or so it appears. By the way, I have to apologize. I get on a head of steam going sometimes here and forget to check the chat and the comments in the chat until we get towards the end. I'm going to make a point to check the comments and I'll be addressing those throughout. So please, if you feel so inclined, drop your comments in the chat window. I would love to address those. I get absent-minded on occasion. So I want to start with something that brought a little chuckle to me and brought, how can I put this? Apoplexy to many others in the state of Idaho. This is not an endorsement. I'm not running a campaign commercial, but I want you to see part of one of Ammon Bundy's governor campaign ads that is making a few waves right now. Check this out.
Idaho liberals say that if I'm elected as governor, they will leave the state. Well, I'm here to tell you that when I'm elected governor, Idaho will help pay for their moving costs. After all, it's cheaper than keeping them here. Idaho spends nearly 40% of our annual budget on welfare programs. That's almost $4 billion of your tax dollars going up into smoke every year. As governor, we will be getting rid of property tax, income tax, and your grocery tax, and balancing the budget by ending our billion-dollar welfare state. Idaho isn't California, and if liberals have a problem with that, then we'll help them move there. After all, the moving costs will be only a fraction of the price to keep them here. No one is saying you have to leave, but if you're going to stay here, then you have to work like the rest of us.
I'm sorry, but it's just been so long since I've actually seen a political candidate who actually has the capacity to try some humor. And I get it. Not everybody's going to find that funny, but so many of the candidates and so many of the political, their endorsers and their spokespeople are just, they're a giant suck on a sour lemon because do you know how important this is and how important we are? You need to listen to us. So yeah, Ammon Bundy has really got some people riled up, and whether you believe he has the support to prevail in the gubernatorial race or not, there is no doubt that he is shaping the landscape and forcing the other candidates to address things they probably rather wouldn't. Why else would Brad Little, the incumbent, he's got all that strength of the incumbency behind him. He's got an R beside his name. Really, you would think Brad Little would feel, 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Democratic candidate, I'm sorry, his name escapes me at the moment here. He didn't want to debate Ammon in the absence of Brad Little. It was funny. I think it was Sun. I was reading an article that they had written about the three candidates, and it was kind of glowing, for the Democratic candidate. Well, he'd be a pretty good choice, and just very neutral at best, but also somewhat supportive. When it came to Ammon, it was all they would say: Ammon Bundy is an anti-government extremist. Or activist. He's anti-government, and that's so much of that is just left for the reader or their audience to fill in the gaps. What does that mean? And they give a little list. Well, here's what he was involved in. No context. It's just this is the typical Bundy boilerplate that mainstream media serves up, and said, well, he refused to respond to requests for an interview. Don't really blame him. At this point, he's not going to win your approval. Why should he waste your time or his in trying to win something that he neither needs nor wants? But it was just interesting to see. They have pegged him as an extremist, and anyone who endorses him must be an extremist. By the way, even for Brad Little, the Idaho Capital Sun seemed to take a very deferential tone. Oh, well, he's not that bad. He's got experience. He's got lots of experience, and I get the impression that the person who is really frightening the political establishment right now is the guy who they keep assuring us has absolutely no chance whatsoever of winning. And I just have to ask, okay, I don't have any inside information, but if that were true, would they really be reacting like this? Would they have to refer to him as anti-government extremist every time they say his name? I mean, anti-government extremist Ammon Bundy is to the point you have to wipe the spittle off your face, just trying to get the whole title out there. But there's a much greater threat, even greater than Ammon Bundy. The memo has gone out, and this is what we have to watch out for this week. And this is what many members of the Idaho Legacy media have focused on, and that is election denial. Attorney General candidate Tom Arkush discusses election denial, abortion, and other issues at City Club of Idaho Falls. So this was an appearance without, I believe that he did not have Raul Labrador there. But he really was going after Raul Labrador in particular. Arkush said, my opponent continues to love the big lie. And if you don't know, the big lie is the idea that the 2020 election was not on the up and up. Now, they try to boil it down here to one claim, well, that the 2020 election was stolen. That's pretty limiting, and that's a pretty narrow area of concern. So it's easy to say, well, if it wasn't stolen, then we can dismiss all these other complaints. But there were concerns about illegalities, unethical changes in the law and in the way that votes were being cast. And Arkush was referring to false claims made by former President Donald Trump. The 2020 election was stolen. So that line appeared to receive support from those who'd gathered for the event. Apparently, we've been trained to that's our Emmanuel Goldstein. Anyone who believes in the big lie or in the 2020 election was not on the up and up, they are suspect. And one of those present said there is no civility in those who would promote the big lie. Well, I don't know. Does that mean we just can't ask questions? See, here's the problem. The 2020 election, it's not going to be solved if they were to take Joe Biden out of power and put Donald Trump in. That would not solve the problem that most people, myself included, have with how do we know that there weren't ways to manipulate these counts? Why did all the, in 5 swing states, why did the voting all stop at the same time? Why, when they resumed, did they all have suddenly miraculous amounts of votes that seemed to push Biden into, winning territory? If you haven't seen Dinesh D'Souza's movie, 2000 Mules, there are some very serious questions that are raised. And that doesn't mean the election was stolen. But nobody can make the case that these questions have been answered satisfactorily. Labrador has previously said he accepts the results of the 2020 election. Now listen, he has argued there were problems in the election process. That's a very reasonable thing to argue. But without giving specifics, well, there are a lot of different areas to cover. So it's not that he couldn't think of anything necessarily, as, there are a lot of different areas that there are questions. Labrador, who was a U.S. representative for 8 years, admitted to telling former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows he would not have certified the election results if he were in Congress in 2020. Okay, now that's his opinion. He is welcome to it. And frankly, I would hope there would be people who would say, no, I wouldn't certify the results if I felt that there was something fraudulent or untrue about them. Now, Arkush also criticized Labrador and other Republicans' stance on abortion, saying the state's trigger law, since it went into effect, he'd heard from doctors saying they don't want to practice in Idaho, which makes me wonder, well, are abortions the only thing that they do, or is there something more here? He argued the law could turn Idaho into a medical desert and drive other professionals out of the state. Okay, obviously, without abortions as easy to get as, a pack of smokes, why the doctors are just going to want to pack up and leave. I don't believe that's necessarily true, but that is one of the big Democrat points. We have to have abortion on demand, killing children on demand, getting porn to your children through their school libraries or through the public libraries. We have to be able to do this, getting your kids in front of drag queens. It's a weird political platform, but this seems to be what, this is where the Democrat Party has settled in many ways. Arkush also said he would take action to lower fuel prices, arguing that companies have been price gouging to increase profits. He said he believes some gas companies may be colluding to set prices, saying the profit margins being realized by gasoline retailers across the state of Idaho are often out of line with their wholesale cost. I don't think he has a clue how much that cost can fluctuate between refilling their tanks. He said gas dealers in some markets appear to be acting in tandem. If collusion is playing a part, I will not hesitate to act. Oh, goody, here we have another AG who wants to insert the state into more areas of our lives, including economics, where he clearly doesn't understand why it's essential the state not meddle with prices. Arkush also spoke out against recent efforts to ban access to books in school and public libraries. I believe I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Not just any books. Not just, books on civics and the importance of democracy, but books that teach kids, how to engage in various sexual practices and encourage them to explore deviancy and even their own gender identity. Those kind of books. So is this a matter of appropriateness for children, or is this a matter of, they're just out to ban books because those people don't want to have fun? He also discussed water rights and said he would look into the recently announced merger of Albertsons and Kroger, arguing it would leave northwestern communities in Idaho with no competing grocery stores. Now, I know I'm being a little bit tough on Tom Arkush, at least in this case, but everything he's talking about is simply more government, bigger government, more politicizing of things that are just we can do without government interfering in every aspect of our lives. I really believe this is one of the things that offends people so deeply about Ammon Bundy's ad that I played for you earlier. What, he's telling people to move so we can save on the money we're spending on welfare? How dare he attack the poor? He's not attacking the poor. He's attacking the system that allows nearly $4 billion a year to be siphoned off from the public and spent on welfare programs. Now, that's not leaving the poor out in the cold, because what it does is it pushes that responsibility back to communities, churches, and philanthropy, which is where it actually belongs in the first place. That's where real charity takes place, when it's voluntary. Not when it comes out of your paycheck because somebody, felt like they needed to take that money and go put it to good use because you couldn't possibly figure out where to send it. So let's move on with a little more talk about how prolonged challenges by losing candidates could overshadow November election results. This is Idaho Capital Sun warning about this. Well, now we've got to be careful. Those election deniers, that's the problem here. Across the country, Republicans following in Trump's shadow who deny the results of the 2020 election are running for prominent statewide offices, including governor and secretary of state. Now, they give us an example. Steve Simon, Minnesota's Democratic Secretary of State, is facing an election denier in November. Kim Crockett, the GOP nominee, has not committed to accepting the results of the election. If she's not psychic, like if she doesn't have real clairvoyant ability, I'd say that's probably a pretty safe way to approach things. Now, if she could say something to the effect of, when we see the results of the election, and when we are certain that those results are in fact on the up and up and there's nothing, suspect or out of order about them, yes, then I would consider, accepting the results. But until that time, you're asking about a hypothetical, and I'm going to lock myself in and say, of course I will accept it, regardless. That's essentially saying, here, sign this form that you're already conceding the race. Because who knows? Maybe something could come up. I mean, it's within the realm of possibility. But listen to Steve Simon. Why it's disqualifying for any office, but in particular for this office. The office of Secretary of State in Minnesota and in most states is about upholding the law when it comes to how we elect people to public office, and it's simply disqualifying for someone who wants to be in this office to thumb their nose at the law and preview an election denial campaign. I fail to see where his opponent is thumbing her nose at the law. I see her expressing some skepticism, but you know what? Given what we saw in the 2020 election, given the pushback that we saw following Trump's election in 2016, I don't think that's such a bad idea to not commit to, yes, I will sign this pledge where, right here, double my IQ or no money back. Oh, sounds good to me. No, wait till you see the results. That doesn't mean, I can only sign off if I win. It's doing your due diligence. Listen to this, though. Experts say they're more worried about the consequences for democracy if election deniers win their races. Why would that be? If these election deniers win, are they going to challenge that race? Is that the one they're going to say, this was totally screwed with. I don't deserve to be elected? Hardly. This just smacks of hysteria. Oh, these election deniers. And there's a strong possibility that candidates who still claim that the 2020 election was stolen will also claim that their own election was stolen from them. A troubling scenario that may not end in 2022. And it didn't begin in 2020. Why do we have to pretend that this is something that only came up after Trump lost the 2020 election? This has been going on for a long time. In fact, let me play for you just a short clip of Arizona gubernatorial candidate Carrie Lake. Watch how she handles media when they keep asking her about, well, how come you keep aligning with these election deniers? Why is it that you are willing to go on as an election denier and express doubts about the 2020 election? Check out how she puts them in their place.
Mariano was at the insurrection. And
Wrong one. Let me give you the right video.
Well, actually, I have to give you a tough one once in a while.
You know, I did a little, actually, Anthony, how old are you?
20.
Are you a journalist?
No.
Well, you did better research than half these people. Let's talk about election deniers. Here's 150 examples of Democrats denying election results. Oh, wow, look at this. This is from Joe Biden's press secretary. Reminder, Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Georgians and Stacey Abrams. Democrats saying that. Is that an election denier? Oh, look at this. Just heard Republican Ryan Costello said it would be difficult for Stacey Abrams to win because she lost her state bid, but yet she's still claiming she never lost. This is outright. Hillary Clinton. Trump is an illegitimate president. Is she an election denier? This one says, was the 2016 election legitimate? It now definitely is a question worth asking. That's the Los Angeles Times. So it's okay for Democrats to question elections, but it's not okay for Republicans. It's a crock of BS. Every one of you knows it. We have our freedom of speech, and we're not going to relinquish it to a bunch of fake news propagandists. If you want a copy of these, I'm sure that Anthony would help you get a copy and help you learn how to be journalists, but look it up. It's been happening for a long time. Since 2000, people have questioned the legitimacy of our elections. And all we're asking is that in the future, we don't have that have to happen anymore. When I'm governor, we're going to make sure we have honest elections. We want the Democrats, the Independents, and the Republicans to all know that their vote counted. We want fair, honest, and transparent elections, and we're going to deliver that for the people. But just remember, guys, this is one page after Hillary Clinton says George W. Bush was selected president, not elected. So let's start, if you're going to start throwing around terms like election denier, let's remember who the other election deniers were. Hillary Clinton and all the Democrats. Next question.
Boom. Wow, that is a mic drop moment. She has some experience, having been a member of the media. She takes absolutely none of their crap, but there's something very satisfying about watching Carrie Lake put these reporters in their place, and rightly so. So, turning to denialism, the article in the Idaho Capital Sun says it's not a new phenomenon after losing an election. Candidates try to see if there's anything they can do to change the outcome. Now they're talking about recounts and lawsuits all being part of the electoral process. A candidate's refusal to concede is not that significant, election experts said. Conceding has no legal value. It's more of a custom that occurs along with a peaceful transfer of power. Now, in close elections, candidates have a right to request a recount, either paid for by themselves or with public funds, depending on the state. They can also bring valid challenges to the court or even far-flung challenges if they're willing to spend money and time arguing on points that the court will likely reject. How far are they willing to go? Well, they say here in 2020, Trump exhausted all legal avenues, but was still not willing to accept the result. Okay, I got to beg to differ with all legal avenues were exhausted. Certainly, he exhausted what legal avenues were available to him at the time. The problem is, most of those court challenges never ever got before the court. They were tossed out on some technicality or some procedural error, or just the courts were treating it like a hot potato. I don't want to handle this. Don't give it to me. Let's pass it on to somebody else. As far as I know, there was only one case that actually was heard by a court rather than just summarily dismissed and, kicked along the road there. And that was in Pennsylvania. And strangely enough, as I recall, in that Pennsylvania case, it was found that there was a basis for the possibility that something illegal or fraudulent had taken place with the ballots. So the idea that, well, this has all been thoroughly investigated and been tried and adjudicated in courts of law, it really hasn't, not yet. And that's why questions remain, because people insist, well, you can't even ask about it. Well, this is why inquiring minds still want to know. Now, some are saying that the House committee investigating the January 6th attack, for instance, on the U.S. Capitol, they're still calling it an attack or an insurrection. They've voted to subpoena Trump as the central cause of the insurrection. So again, the danger to our democracy, by which they mean our rule. I want you to see, this is the clip I started to play earlier. Listen to these likely Trump voters or Trump supporters putting a humble MSNBC reporter in her place by pointing out the holes in the narrative. She doesn't know what to say. Check it out.
Mariano was at the insurrection, and he was photographed breaching one of the restricted areas. Is that okay?
Which area? Because I saw a video where Capitol officers were taking away barriers and unlocking doors for people. So, I mean,
they opened the gates.
So it shouldn't be disqualifying for an elected official if they participated in January 6th?
He didn't strike anybody. He didn't hurt anybody.
And the only one that died was a protester there, not a Capitol police
An unarmed
officer.
female veteran was
That's
shot
the
by
only one that
police.
died.
That's the only one who died.
A police officer did die.
No, it was a
Heart attack.
stroke.
That's
not on site.
Caused by that. That's because
Right.
he shouldn't have been a police officer. It was one woman.
So
who was
what do
shot.
you make, though, overall of January 6th? I mean, watching that footage, it was pretty disturbing. I mean, there were people throwing excrement at the walls, and it was it's the Capitol.
It looked a lot like Antifa's actions
Yeah, it looked
to
a
me.
lot, except on a much smaller scale. It looked the same as the Black Lives Matter riots.
That's what I saw the similarities to
around
be.
the country, not just
Minneapolis
one.
burns. Kenosha burns.
But so it's okay just because one side that you disagree with?
I'm
it's
saying
okay
Antifa
for-
It's
infiltrated.
good for one, it's good for the other.
Anybody
I don't
who
see it
harms
that way.
anybody who caused property destruction, that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah,
but if you're
on
there
either
making
side.
your voice heard at the
Right.
people's house, no less,
Yeah.
that's, again, it's a fundamental constitutional right of an American citizen. And people should not be being held political prisoner because of it.
For misdemeanors. That's East Germany.
That's East Germany.
Tactics.
Yeah, that's what's scary.
It was an actual fiery but mostly peaceful protest. And the other ones that were the opposite.
Was the protest legitimate in your
Our
eyes
administration,
because...
I feel like, is using it as their Reichstag fire.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're using it as.
Do you think that President Trump could have quelled the violence that day?
Not him personally.
I don't think so, no.
I don't think so.
It started while he was still speaking. I was actually there. I was there to see what I thought was going to be the last time I ever saw Trump, little did I know.
So did he tell everybody to go and start rioting?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, and it actually, I stayed for the whole speech, like a ton of people did. And then we all headed to the Capitol because he said, let's go to the Capitol and peacefully let our voices
keyword.
be heard. And we get to the Capitol, we're like, what the hell's going on? Because it had already happened.
I'm pretty sure I saw Democratic operatives instigating people to cross
totally.
barriers.
Wow. This is why you're not supposed to question the news media. You'll get these crazy ideas. You'll be a conspiracy theorist like these people who, by the way, what they were saying was factual. These are not people who are just, their tinfoil's too tight. These are people who have actually done their own homework, just like I encourage you to do. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe the mainstream media. Do your own homework and you'll find it's a big world out there. So let's come back again to the election deniers. There are this was a great line here. Some election denier candidates running this year have close ties to extremist groups. Whoa, slow down on the details there, partner. Again, we're left to our own emotional associations. Who could those extremist groups be? But we have to fill in the blanks. This is done deliberately. This is the bogus predicate, rather, in which, something is specified. And, well, if it's an extremist group, it must be bad. And they tell us some election denier candidates running this year have close ties. Now, they're talking about groups like QAnon or somebody else. Maybe some people do, maybe they don't. But you can still have very legitimate questions about the 2020 election and other elections, too, without, immediately being tied to an extremist group. At least in reality. That's how it works. Here you even have a few organizations trying to protect against the threat of candidates refusing to accept the results of elections by asking them to sign pledges. Now, while the pledges aren't likely to stop the staunch deniers, and deniers will likely emerge after the November election, experts say the real test will be whether the pattern continues past 2022. Like you heard Carrie Lake say, it didn't start in 2020. And the question over elections certainly isn't going to stop with this election. And I want to show you the picture here. You know, look at this. This is New York City businesses boarding up their windows ahead of the 2020 presidential election. Do you remember this? It wasn't just them. Every major population center, the downtown areas, were boarding up their windows, especially for election night. Why was that? Come on. You know what the answer is? It's because they feared left-wing violence, just like they saw in 2016 when Trump won. The fear was, well, if Trump wins, you know, the left has said it's going to absolutely burn this MFer to the ground. And you know what? Their actions seem to show that's exactly what they might be willing to do. So maybe we have to take them serious once in a while. So essentially, when you hear the term election denier, what you're hearing is a plea for a kind of purity test that will somehow assure you that this person is right in their thinking and supports everything that's going on with the status quo. Look, that would be fine and dandy if the status quo was actually living up to the principles of correct government, proper government, legitimate government, but it's not. You and I are feeling it in various ways. The more aware you are of what's going on, the more you're likely to recognize how much of your paycheck is being taken away by people in government, ostensibly for only good purposes, but it's still being taken away and you have no say in the matter. Or at least if you do try to resist, they will send men with guns and badges to force you to do what they want. People who, for instance, have started small businesses understand the incredible array of regulatory and just bureaucratic mazes that they have to fight their way through just to keep their business legitimate and open. The state is not operating in our interest. In fact, can I just be bold and tell you, right now, most of the people in top positions of authority consider us the enemy. They treat us like the enemy. They need to control us, and the fear of losing control of us is something that weighs very heavily on them. That's why they want these purity tests. Here's a good example, and a hat tip to Dustin for sharing this on Twitter earlier today. Lisa for Boise tweets, at the top of my wish list for this position, Boise Arts and History is hiring someone, a skilled administrator and organizer, and my wish is that people who embrace a worldview of anti-racism apply for consideration. Please share this job opportunity with people in your network who have a gift for consciousness raising. Yeah. Look, there may be somebody who's perfect for the job, who's very anti-racist, but there may be somebody who isn't anti-racist who would be perfect for the job as well. The problem is we've got these purity tests being administered, and right now you're seeing the purity is anyone who questions the status quo, anyone who questions whether government is doing too much or even doing things it shouldn't be doing at all is extremist, is the enemy, is a threat to our democracy ad nauseum. So what do you do about it? Well, the answer is go to the source wherever possible. If you're going to vote for somebody, have you taken the time to actually talk to them? Even if it's over the phone. You know, if you haven't, just keep in mind, you are relying on a thoroughly corrupted news media to tell you what to think about a particular candidate. And you can see, when you see groups getting together, we're banding together in the name of law and order and decency and, you know, trouble in River City, you know, to try to prevent anti-government extremist Ammon Bundy from, you know, getting close to the levers of power. Well, the reason they're afraid is because it's their grasp on power that they see coming to an end. And in many cases, rightfully so. Because there were plenty of these folks who abused that power and abused that authority, locked us down, told us we were non-essential, did things which actually harmed us. We're supposed to forget that? Just pretend like, well, you know, that's just part of the responsibilities of running a society. No, there's a better way. And it involves more personal freedom, limited government, lower taxes, less regulation, more freedom to choose your own course. I understand that's not for everybody. Scares some people to death, but really what they're most afraid of, at least the ones who are making the most noise, they're afraid of losing control over you and me. They should be afraid, because we don't need their control. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our